I'm Lori Aikman, and I'm a functional health practitioner helping busy working professional moms boost their energy, lose weight, and balance hormones naturally.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Yeah, I just want to say before you even we dive into anything, I just want to give you kudos. You are a week postpartum today, right? Or
I think tomorrow would be officially, yeah.
Tomorrow a week. Okay. So your baby is 6 days old now.
5 days old, yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So thank you so much for being here today. And I'm just like amazed that you're, showing up. So I remember just being after like we were talking before, like not too bad after the second baby as it was the first. Just maybe that knowing what to expect and stuff. So
100%.
So tell us, who you are and what you do right now, what your business is.
So I am a kinesiologist. So kinesiologists, we study body movement. I specifically focus on those who are injured, and I use my Pilates background, because I'm a Pilates instructor as well, as more my directive for exercise rehab. I still also do strength training, depending on what the client wants when they come in, but Pilates is my specialty. So I apply a lot of Pilates to the recovery. And so I'm really passionate about car accidents, just because I had been through my own car accident. So I work with a lot of insurance cases, athletes, partially because my husband runs the Nanaimo Kettlebell Club and I'm an athlete as well. So I like to work with the athletes in injury kind of perspective.
Like
not
rehabbing
training.
After injury.
Yeah. So if they experience an injury or whatnot, then I'll deal with that, where he deals with the athletes. And yeah, so I also kind of am directing myself in the direction of educating other movement specialists. So working on different webinars and education things for movement specialists.
Got it. So educating other kinesiologists, is that what you mean? Okay. Yes. Got it. Wonderful. Awesome. And so obviously it's always funny, like you and I talked before, so I know a little bit about your story. I'm not hearing for the first time, but you have an experience of burnout, as a mom and as a entrepreneur owning your own business. That started a few years back. Do you want to take us like where you started, where that started, and maybe the things leading up to you kind of going, okay, this is too much?
Yeah, I have been very fortunate in the sense of my Pilates classes have always been very popular. And several years ago, back like 2017, I decided that I was going to go out on my own. So I was working at a studio, I'd worked at clinics, and I decided I was going to move my business into my home and work. And part of the discussion was that I could afford to work less, but I didn't. So I transferred, opened up my business. Lots of people followed me, and that's where I was very fortunate. But I just continued to work these extensive hours, like 6 days a week, 15-hour days. And I would take that seventh day of the week and do all the office and the back end stuff.
Oh my gosh.
And then 2017, we also competed at Worlds for kettlebell sport. So it was a big transition. And we had agreed that when we finished Worlds, we would start a family.
Okay.
So being an athlete, working those hours, and then I had my first child in 2019 and never gave myself a break. Right. And so I already was living this hectic lifestyle. Then you take this life transforming moment.
Yes.
And you add it in, and it not only is it identity shift.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like, I just wouldn't give myself a break.
Yeah.
And I just put that much more pressure on myself. So
Sure.
I initially started my maternity leave off and had set myself up so that I had staff working for me and preparing to have a couple months off to spend with my daughter. But COVID hit, and I went into this like reaction mode of finances. So I needed to protect my family financially. I needed to protect my business because this was something I was trying to build. And I was trying to do it all and didn't know how to ask for help.
Got it.
And so all of it built up together and created that burnout phase.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I ask you, I just was thinking earlier when you said, you were working 6 days a week, long days, things like that. Did you find when you went on your own, were you working more than you did when you worked for somebody else? You working more hours, or were you still putting in about the same amount of hours?
I would say it was the same amount. Like when we had done the calculations, it was like, oh, I could cut way back, but for some reason I didn't.
Yeah.
Right. Because I had it in my head, I can do these hours. So I just filled them.
Yeah.
And what was I filling them for?
Yeah.
Right. Like there was no need to work those hours. It was what I knew. It was a comfort level. So I just kind of continued old habits, even though the point was to transition to work less and have more time to enjoy to myself.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was kind of, because before when I was working for someone else, it was kind of people pleasing, but then it was like, there's no one to please but myself now. I'm the boss. And then I just kept doing it.
Yeah. Do you think that was, well, you were saying the identity shift of becoming a mom, but do you think that was like an identity thing too? I can relate, like when I worked back in the hospital and working night, it was like this, I worked really hard, like I owned this, like,
yes,
I work my ass into the ground, and like that badge of honor that I held on to. I mean, that might not be your experience, but
no, I completely agree. It was kind of like, look how tough I am in a way, right? Look what I can do. And people would always say to me, oh, you do it all. And I'd be like, that's right. And and then it's like, why am I doing it all? Like, for what purpose? Like, was it really that satisfying? Parts of it were.
Well,
but
and you're competitive since you're an athlete. You're competitive too, which I think add to that nature.
Yeah. And it does add to that nature. And it's always kind of like the next thing, right? Well, there's only so many hours of the day. Kind of realizing if you're already seeing those many people, you can't add any more.
Yeah.
Kind of idea.
You're going to hit capacity. Yeah. Okay. So fast forward, then you had so that practice started in 2017. So then you were like 2 years of the practice. You got pregnant during that time and then had your daughter. So because we had lockdown starting March 19, right? March
2020.
Yeah, 2020. Okay. It's like getting mixed up on years even now. Seems like all a blur, right?
Yeah.
So then, okay, so then how was that during the shutdown? What were you, because your business is in person, how did that like affect what you did in your work?
Right. So fitness wise, the trend at that time was all these online classes. And because the staff that I had hired decided to go on CERB, it was like, hey, I've got to do this then. So I would come into my space and I would teach online classes. And technology wasn't really part of my business. So it was a huge learning curve. And prior to that, I had a scheduling software that I was using, and they went bankrupt.
Oh, wow.
So I had 2 weeks to find a new scheduling software. So I would stay up I'd get up to breastfeed in the middle of the night, and I would stay up and I would work for several hours in the night doing trying to find the software, trying to figure out how to do online stuff, writing your COVID protocols for what your business is going to do.
Yeah.
And then you would go to bed and you'd wake up at 7 a.m. and there was an announcement that they had changed, right? So then I would do it all over again. So I wasn't sleeping.
Yeah.
But yeah.
How much were you sleeping at night, do you think? Just a couple hours here and there? Yeah.
Yeah. And the trend was online. Well, I tried doing some classes on YouTube, and I was getting kicked off YouTube for sexual content.
Whoa.
And
for Pilates? For
Pilates.
Wow.
And we couldn't figure it out. Like, it must have been robots, right? Like they were just picking up on something.
Yeah, some kind of body movement or
cues is what we think it might have been.
Okay.
Because
like tighten your this, or is that what you mean? So, like you cueing your clients?
Yeah, like you say pubic bone, like you'll address your pubic bone for placement of your pelvis. The videos that kept getting shut down, I would always use a TheraBand or an elastic band in that workout. So we weren't sure if it was like pelvic placement, pelvic stability kind of concepts, or if it had something to do with the piece of equipment.
Wow.
So I had to stop using YouTube, but in the beginning, our association told us we couldn't use Zoom. So a lot of people were using Zoom. My clients were like, why are you not using Zoom? I'm like, I'm not allowed. So there was this kind of like, how do I make this work with some of these restrictions?
Yeah. Gosh, that's so stressful.
Yeah. And then my husband, he's doing his classes and he's like rocking it.
Yeah.
And I'm just
fitness classes?
Yeah, kettlebell style fitness classes. And yeah, he's rocking it online, and I'm like crying in the corner because I'm getting kicked off and nothing's working, and Wi-Fi is going down, right? Because everyone's on the internet, and it just kind of mentally added up. And I started to not think clearly.
Yeah.
And like, well, the lack of sleep definitely made an impact on there, but yeah, getting frustrated very easily. I actually had a moment where something went wrong. I set up one of the online videos on the wrong account, and we couldn't find it, and people were asking where the video was. And I just came home and I threw the biggest tantrum. I went into our gym and I started slamming my medicine ball, and I was like crying and I was screaming. And my husband actually looked at me and he told me I scared him.
Really? Wow.
And like, the reason I went and did that was to physically release all this emotion I had, but I didn't know how to. I didn't want to yell at anyone. There was no one to blame.
Yeah.
I didn't want to like physically hurt anyone. I just knew that I had to get it out.
Yeah.
But he had never seen me behave like that. So that was kind of that turning point of like, I've hit that wall.
Yeah. Something's gotta go. Wow. How was that for you in just hearing him reflect that back? Like,
I'm not sure if I really absorbed it in the moment. Like, I knew that I was frustrated, and I knew that he knew I was frustrated. But but I wasn't ready to make changes yet.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like that was some of the significant signs, but I hadn't gotten deep enough into it to really realize that I needed to make those changes.
Yeah.
So I don't think I absorbed the impact it had on other people yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I can imagine in that time, with everything going on with COVID, it's like everyone feels frustrated. Everyone, so I feel like it could be easy to just minimize and be like, well, everyone's frustrated right now. Businesses are, and kind of not be able to, see the writing on the wall or whatever, however you'd say it. So
I think that's actually a very valid point. I think it was kind of like, what else am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to plug forward, right? And I'm one of those people, like, I will plug forward, but unfortunately at the same time, when I plug forward, I might bang my head against the wall repetitively, which isn't exactly the smartest thing. So I think it was a little bit like, what else am I supposed to do other than keep trying, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So what was the next shift then after that? You were saying that was kind of like a key moment, I guess, in the process for you.
The turning point for me was when I started to, I was picking fights with my husband, like just full on, picking fights, being angry at him, resentful. I was dreaming about how I could escape this life, right? Like just get out of here and just like go somewhere and be by myself. You would think during COVID, you're like, but you want isolation or you're in isolation. But it was the overwhelm of the demands of clients, the demands of family.
You were a new mom in the middle of that.
Yeah. And part of it too was I felt like my only break from family was when I was with clients, but then I'm never by myself. Right. So it was like I was always with someone, and that lack of space for myself, other than when I went to bed at night, just was like overwhelming. And so I would just dream about like, what if I just went and got a hotel and like hid in a hotel for a week by myself, right? And then I knew on the other side of it, I couldn't do that because I would miss my family too much.
Yeah.
Right. So it was kind of like this, what do? You're in this kind of back and forth of, I don't want to do that, but I want to do that. And it was just signifying that something needed to change.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I know so many women can relate. I can relate to that myself even. Yeah. I feel like I'm with my kids when I'm not working, but then when I'm working, when I have childcare for them, I'm working. So then when is that, it's like, can you go to bed so that I can be alone, and then like, I need to have time with my husband though, too. And I know so many women can relate to that, especially moms. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Gosh. So what was your next shift then? Like realizing something's got to change and
like I had started listening to Heather Chauvin's podcast. I'd come across her being interviewed on a business podcast, and then started listening to her podcast, and a lot of the things that she said really resonated with me. Like, you lead by example by the way you behave for your children. And I really believed in that. And I liked how she had different aspects of not just like mom life, but like business. And I could really relate to it. I could relate to her personality. I see a lot of similarities, her personality to mine. And I just hit a point where I was like, okay, I'm going to try some of these little courses that she did. And I saw the value in them. And then and so one of my many things, which is why I'm such a like workaholic, is finances. Like I struggle to, one, spend money on myself. I will work hard, spend money on other people, not on myself. Yes. And literally think I have to save every little penny. And so a big step was investing in that program, and the changes that have occurred have been slow but progressive. And even now, like it's been about a year and a half since I started that program, I now notice how when I started certain things, I would resist. Right? Like I actually avoided, she does a lot of group calls, and I would avoid those group calls. And I was like, why? Like I would tell myself I didn't have the time, but I didn't make the time. Where now I make the time, but I also, over the last couple of years, struggled to find childcare. So even though I was learning, I needed to create these boundaries so that I did have space. I was struggling to find someone. But also I was struggling with the whole finance thing.
Yeah. Oh, I can totally relate to where you're at. Well, and I just want to say for context, if anybody that doesn't know, so that's how you and I connected, was Heather Chevain's community. And so she has two different communities, but both for women, for, I would say like personal development was maybe a way you could call it. And I think a lot of the women are moms, not all, but a lot of the women are moms, but just realizing this contrast in their life of how they want to feel and how they do feel. And then that, so back to you were saying, so you're in this group, you've chosen to invest and to, change your life. You're recognizing that contrast of like, I'm angry. But then that resistance of, I just wanted to hammer in that point, because I know so many women, I can even tell you some of my clients, of like making the time for yourself, so, and like that resisting. I think sometimes you can even pay money. I'm going to pay money. It's like, I like this idea of who I'm going to be when I pay this money for this course, but then I'm going to resist actually showing up and doing the work to feel the way I want to feel. It's like this self-sabotage, this like, I think and I might be putting words in your mouth, but we can feel more comfortable in our discomfort than in feeling good. It's more comfortable to stay stuck than it is to do the uncomfortable work to feel good.
And like the word that I've been using lately, and Heather's called me on it, is I keep going for safe.
Okay.
So as much as it makes me miserable, I keep being in the safe zone. So I repeat, because that makes me feel safe, even though I'm kind of craving safety, but it's actually taking myself out of that safety to get to that next level of like, this is what I want. So creating those boundaries, I feel safe not showing up. But if I create that space, which feels uncomfortable to me, I actually get what I want. And like in the beginning, I struggled so much going to work and the mom guilt. And I know so many people can relate to that.
Yes.
And like my daughter's on the other side of the door. I work from home. And it was so painful. I did not want to be at work. And it was showing, right? Like that's another sign of the burnout. Like the way I probably spoke and treated my clients, as much as no one said it to me, I was probably not the nicest version of myself. And like my husband constantly reminds me, he's like, they come for you. And I'm always like, why? But the reason I'm saying why is because I can feel how miserable I am or was, where if I show up in a good mood, That's why they're there.
Yeah.
They want that conversation. They want that connection.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't show up for that,
mm-hmm.
but if they know that that quality is there,
mm-hmm.
I think it can remind you of what you need to get back to.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I'm just thinking so much. I'm thinking of times when I was working in the hospital and just burnout and like, yeah, just not showing up like the best version of myself. And like I remember my background's, I'm a nurse practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
And I was on night shift and I got in a fight with one of the nurses, and just just that blaming. And then I could tell we were both in burnout, because she then like threw some personal attacks at me of like, well, nobody likes you, we were both just like, needed
Done.
some sleep. Yeah. Needed to get off night shift, needed some sleep. Yeah. So yeah, you were saying, okay, just to recap, that like not showing up as a nice version of yourself, you were like picking fights with your husband.
Yeah.
The lack of sleep, I think, well, then can lead us to burnout. But then
Totally.
do you ever, I know for me, if there's some like an anxiety component, I was talking to a family member about this week, of just, I don't sleep when I'm all anxious and everything's going on. I'm waking up in the middle of the night, mind racing, and
that's a huge thing for me. Like I've always kind of struggled with sleep. Mm-hmm. So I'm very adamant about my sleep routine, but so I can fall asleep probably like that, mm-hmm. but I will wake up and mm-hmm. that's where it's showing up. And I can lay there and literally be like, what is on my mind, right? Like what is back there, because this is good. This is good. This is good. What is it in the back of my head that's waking me? Mm-hmm. And like I've brought it up a couple times, it's my insecurity around finances. Mm-hmm. That is a common thing that comes up.
Yeah.
And it'll just be
wanting to feel safe.
Yes. And it'll be something as simple as, don't forget to pay the bill in the morning. Mm-hmm. But my brain will just kind of cycle, and it definitely shows up more when I'm anxious. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing that I notice is if I'm not smart about my coffee intake.
Oh, yes.
So like
too much, too late in the day, or things like that. Mm-hmm.
If I have it like after 1 o'clock, maybe 2 o'clock, I almost can guarantee I'll be up at some point with my brain racing in the middle of the night. So I try to be conscious of it. But there was a period, I must have been having 5 to 6 cups of coffee, and I would feel my anxiety in my chest.
Oh yeah.
And it escalated around specific clients. Partially because of what they would come in with. And I could feel that like pacing, because they were emotionally unloading. And I was taking it on top of like having way too much coffee, that it was like clashing with each other.
Wow.
And so I count those cups now and I keep
like, all right, that's one too many today. Let's back it up. Yes. Yes. Oh, definitely. I can relate. What has been, so it's been an evolution, not like I just did this and my burnout was over, right?
No.
What are, and you kind of, I think, are speaking to some of those. So what are some strategies that you use now because you're still practicing the same way, correct? You still you do some in person. Do you still do virtual?
A little bit, but not as much. So no online classes, like that's all in person now. I do see some clients online because that's what works for them. And then I teach some of my courses online, my webinars and stuff, but the majority is in person. But sorry, what was the original question?
Well, and I was asking about your strategies now for managing burnout.
Yeah. So, I got into meditation, which I had actually tried meditation years ago, like back when I was training for Worlds, and I found it would actually escalate my anxiety. So I stopped it. And now I don't know why. I just find I would wake up in the middle of the night super anxious, but it was probably because of where I was already in that like hectic lifestyle, where now I wake up and I meditate in the morning, but I'm also very accepting. Like if my daughter wakes up while I'm meditating, I try to include her versus worrying that it wasn't like perfect. So she sits with me and I just say, oh, we're taking our deep breaths. And she sits there, it's super cute, does her little deep
How
breath.
old is she now? So she's like 4?
3.
3. Okay.
Yeah. And so there's that. And then journaling. So I've resisted journaling because I've always identified with not being a good writer. And I also was very scared of being judged on what was written in there. Like if it was found someone reading it. But now I feel I'm in a safe environment. Like I know my husband doesn't care what I write in that book, so he doesn't even look at it. And I also have told myself that how it looks on that page doesn't have to be right. Right? Like there's a lot of like incomplete sentences and arrows and this and that, so that it works for me. It's not a sentence structure so that's how I've been
Nobody's grading you.
Pardon?
Nobody's grading you,
Exactly.
You're not
there's
turning it in for an assignment.
There's no perfection to it, and that's the way it should be. But I think for a long time, like that's what I've struggled with is like, oh, it has to be a certain way to do it. And so the journaling and the meditation have been a huge game changer. And then parts of like Heather's program in the sense of energy time management, that was something I resisted, but am learning the value of. So again, creating that space for me. So now I look at my week and I look at my week and I think,
can you just say what you mean by energy time management if somebody doesn't know what that is?
She has you look at your week and try to schedule things on how it's going to make you feel. So if you want to feel like energetic and alive and positive, you have to pick things that are going to create those feelings within you. And like where I struggled with that was like responsibilities or priorities. I'd be like, but this is my responsibility to do X, Y, and Z. This is my but what's a priority in the sense of life, and what's a priority in the sense of taking care of yourself are two different things. And I had to come to an understanding of that. And it's taken a long time for me to really work it out. And I've also struggled with the fact that I would say, oh, but if I complete these tasks, that makes me feel good. But that's a false sense of satisfaction. Like it reduces maybe some stress, but does it actually make me feel good?
Yeah.
It's actually something I want to do.
You're saying like I can check it off the list. Maybe is it so like you felt like there was things, well, if I check this off my list, I'll feel better, but it didn't really. Is that what you're saying?
And then I can easily just put something else on that list because I completed that, right? So it's not about checking off the list, the to-dos, it's being present. So like a big achievement when I look at that schedule is there space where nothing is scheduled? And I try to have that, or I try to have space where it's literally like, this is the time where I play with my kids. And it's what they want to do because that makes me feel good. And then having like my journaling and meditation scheduled in there, because that makes me feel good. So knowing those are in there, knowing my workouts are in there, those things make me feel good. But I also think, okay, what do I need to do? And what can I let go?
Yes. Oh, I think that's huge.
I am learning to embrace, my house isn't clean. And if someone wants to say something to me, because I used to go into a frenzy if someone was coming to my house about how I had to scrub and clean my house, and I'd go nuts. Like my husband, again, he would be like, oh, I always know when her parents are coming because she just like gets down on the floor,
my gosh,
scrubbing the corners.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, okay, whatever. And so it's taken a long time for me to have that acceptance of that.
Yeah.
And it's not like I don't want to clean house. There's only so many things you can do in a day.
Yes. Yes.
And when you're a business owner, there's always things to do.
And now with 2 kids, not just a business owner, a business owner with 2 children. Yes.
And when you put that toy away and you literally turn 180 degrees, that toy is back out. So acceptance of the state at which your house is in.
What is it with the toys? It's like, because I'm going to put it away, it's all of a sudden so attractive. Like, oh, you're putting up the train set, but I really want to play with the train set now that you're putting it away, even though it's been sitting here all day, Yes.
Oh, my favorite was just the other day. I went into the front room and I was like, that's my work. What's this doing out here? Oh, those are my notes, Mom. I was making notes. Okay, you've scribbled all over my notes now.
Oh gosh, I know. This is like, my work notebook. Exactly. I take note, and it's got, the little boys scribble all over it.
Keep my fingers crossed that certain files are not requested for.
Oh gosh. Yeah. Oh, that's too funny. I'm curious, do you, there was 2 questions I had. One that I think many women can totally relate to everything you've talked about. I'm curious because this is something I've struggled with, is that the meditation, journaling, that having space on your calendar, that's not productive. I've had this conversation with some of my clients when we're that like high achieving woman, do. It's hard to have space where you don't feel like you're being productive and you're not doing something that, like, I can check the box that I did this. Was that difficult for you?
Yes, and still can be. So I have to give myself permission that it doesn't happen necessarily. And because I try to just kind of keep meditation around 10 minutes, like I've heard podcasts
not doing an hour.
Yeah, they're like, oh, I do 2 hours of meditation. No, sorry. I do 10 minutes. If I'm having a great morning, maybe I get 20 because I woke up at 4 a.m. and no one else is up, really. Let's be honest.
Yes.
But journaling, I might start it and not finish it. I might just not do it that day. And there are times that it's in the back of my head and it's like, oh, today I really need to journal because I just need to like complain. But I let it go because is it really important? No, it makes me feel better. And yes, me feeling better is important. I'm not saying that that's not important, but the process of writing it down on a page where maybe I can take a deep breath and think about, okay, what am I grateful for? The thing that's driving me nuts at the moment, is it really that big of a deal? And the other things that I'm kind of realizing is like, oh, I'm creating this story in my head at this moment. And 1, I don't know that's true. 2, where are those thoughts coming from? So are they important? I need to like brush them off and think about what is important or what is going on at that time. So it's kind of been a lot of self-awareness and not about checking it off the list.
Yeah. That's
and
beautiful.
In the beginning, there are weeks or days where it is check, meditate, check journal, check workout, and I have to catch myself. Right? It's not about doing, it's about being.
Yeah. Love it. Yeah. My other question was, you talked about earlier, clients kind of feeling like an energy leak with with some clients, where you'd feel like they were coming in and unloading with you. Do you, give yourself, like, is there boundaries you set? Are there certain clients you don't work with, or do you set anything around that with kind of protecting your energy with work, just as a business owner?
I would probably say that it's something I have struggled with. Part of the reason I have connections with clients is because of how open and honest I am. Like, I will be honest and say, I'm not having a good day today. But I would rather be like, I'm not having a good day today. And then instead of being fake and being like, I'm good, how are you? And being super cheerful, I can't hack that. So there is that kind of where I kind of open the door, and I see these people sometimes 2 to 3 times a week. You get to know them. Oh, your kid's about to go in this tournament. How did it go for them? Right? Like, you hear their life more than their doctor, their physiotherapist. And so it is hard, but I've also learned, one thing I am learning is I'll pick up a cue where I have said maybe too much, or that the conversation that's going on, I don't like it. So when I was pregnant, both times, I really struggled with people commenting on my body. There were certain people, like if I said I was tired, I was told it was in my head. So my one response when people would ask me how I would feel, I say, I am pregnant. That's how I feel.
There you go. I'm pregnant.
Yeah.
I feel pregnant.
And that's where I would leave it versus describe it, because of being told like my fatigue was in my head. But then I also had to set boundaries, like during both pregnancies, people commenting on how I physically looked. And I had to ask them, I would appreciate it if you don't comment on my body. Some take it okay and apologize. Some actually choose not to work with me after.
Really? Wow.
But
good for you for being, it's so funny how people, it's like, think it's okay to
and it's
talk
not
about that,
because like there's a part of me that should just like think that I'm supposed to not say anything, but at the same time, you don't know what that individual is going through, right? Like when we comment on other people's bodies, we don't know if they have body image issues, if there's some underlying reason they look X, Y, and Z. So to have them, just for any of us to comment on anyone else's body is not out there. And so I am learning, like, if I don't like it, I need to draw the line.
Yeah. I love that. And giving, I feel like that probably gave permission to somebody else, to draw that boundary as well.
I hope it does, because to be honest, I was getting told I was big, but yet I just got induced with my second daughter because both her and I were measuring too small. So there was that internal battle of like, people are telling me I'm huge and that my clothes are too tight. And then yet I'm getting sent into the hospital because we're not, and getting all these tests because I'm not big enough.
Yeah.
Right.
I found that in my pregnancy. I would have people tell me, oh yeah, you're really getting to the end there, you know, or something like that. And then I would have people say, you're so teeny, you know, and it's just like,
it plays with your head.
Yeah.
Whether you want it to or not.
I can't control what's going on. Yeah. Like the baby's growing. I don't know. I'm just, it's weird.
Yeah. And it's perception.
Yes.
Totally perception.
Well, and I, for me, in my experience, I found that it was people who have never had a child, or no offense, but you know, women who had not had babies, or men, you know, who have not had babies, you know, were like, oh, you're gigantic. And then I would have women who were like, oh my gosh, I was twice the size of you and I was pregnant, you know, or
that's kind of the trend I picked up on too, to be honest.
Oh my gosh. Anyways, well, yes. So take that as permission if somebody's listening to, set the boundaries with your clients. So
100%.
So, thank you so much for sharing this story, because I know, I mean, I could see myself in so many parts of your story here, and I know that other women will be able to see themselves in your story too, and just relate. So tell us about, because you said you do some online courses or webinars, and tell us a little about that, and then like where people can find you and connect with you.
So currently I have a webinar coming up. It's called the Prenatal Exercise Experience. So it's training or working with pregnant women so that they can continue to or start exercise while they are pregnant. So any type of movement specialist, whether you be a kinesiologist, physiotherapist, a Pilates instructor, personal trainer, is to kind of educate just about like the different trimesters and symptoms that they might experience, how it affects exercise, things to be aware of. It's just a 1 hour webinar, and my next one is May 13th at 12 p.m.
So this is a training for trainers, just to clarify, right? Like you're training other movement professionals.
Yes. Now, like if someone were pregnant and they wanted to partake in it, they're more than welcome, because they would be able to know what they could and couldn't do during it as well. I also
huge need for that, I think
so. I don't think there's a lot out there, and that's part of where it comes from, and it comes from my personal experience, right? So I've taken courses on how to work with pregnant people and postnatal, but then physically going through it. So some exercises I thought I couldn't do, I could do. Some exercises I thought were fine, didn't feel good in my body. And so that's part of what the webinar is about, is really like communicating with the individuals so that you can figure out what works for them. And then I'm working on a postnatal version of that. And also on a pain management webinar.
So I love that piece you're talking about of just like learning, you know, just not just taking the prescription and saying, here, this is what you need to do, but then working with the individual.
That's huge, right? Like, because no one is the same. And I'm not a very big person. I'm 5'2", and I think body proportions has a huge effect on movement. So when you take that into consideration when they're pregnant, like I even had a client say to me, she's like, oh, my torso is much longer than yours. We were talking about how I felt like I couldn't really side bend or forward bend. And I just felt stiff as a board in my spine. And she was like, yeah, I didn't really experience that, but she has a longer torso. She wasn't much taller than me, but the body dynamics had a difference. So I think those kinds of things aren't really considered. And I also have learned, right, where the egg actually physically attaches in the uterus actually can affect like how much your belly develops. So some people will look very small because they're kind of growing internally
posterior.
Versus if it's posterior attached versus if it's anterior attached, then the belly is more likely to come out forward, which makes sense why it would physically feel different too, right?
Yeah. And I'm just thinking too of like the women that experience back labor versus not, not like the positioning of implantation. So
yes,
we're getting sciencey here, but well, wonderful. So where could they find that? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. So they can either email me at info@returntoform.ca. They can also find me on Instagram at Return to Form Kinesiology.
Got it. Great. And we'll put those in the show notes so that they can just click on the links directly. So
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your experience, and especially, again, 1 week postpartum. I'm just like so amazed by you. So
thank you.
All right. Well, everybody go find Rachel and reach out to her for your movement needs. So, all right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lori.